He sold my couch on Facebook Marketplace before my moving truck even reached the state line. He sold my grandmother's china. He tried to sell my dog. All so he could afford a new life with the woman he got pregnant while I was 3 states away, alone, unpacking boxes into a house he picked out for us. He thought I'd come home broken. Instead, I came home free. And 5 years later, while I'm painting sunsets from a beach house, he's a 50-year-old single dad eating cereal for dinner, completely alone. This is the story of how doing absolutely nothing, except moving on, became the most savage revenge of all. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who swore they'd love you forever, if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought you'd just lie down and disappear, this story is for you. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you're new, and settle in, because this is one of those stories where the universe takes its sweet time, but it does not forget. Let's get into it. My name doesn't matter for this story, so let's just call me Maya. I was 43 years old when my entire world detonated, and like most explosions, it didn't look like one at first. It looked like a moving truck. It looked like cardboard boxes labeled in my own neat handwriting, kitchen, fragile, Maya's books. It looked, for 18 years, like a marriage I thought was solid as bedrock. 18 years. Let that number sit with you for a second, because it's going to matter a lot by the end of this. I married Derek when I was 25. He was charming in that easy, low-effort way some men are, the kind of charm that works because you don't expect anyone to weaponize it later. We built a life together brick by brick, the boring, unglamorous way most marriages actually get built. I worked, he worked, on and off. I was, if I'm honest with myself now, the breadwinner for almost the entire marriage. Not because I demanded that role, because somebody had to keep the lights on, and Derek had a habit of finding reasons jobs weren't a good fit.
I didn't resent it back then.
I loved him. I told myself love means carrying more weight sometimes. I told myself a lot of things back then. 18 years gets you a house. It gets you furniture you actually chose carefully instead of grabbing whatever was cheapest. It gets you 4 pets who think you hung the moon, my dog, Biscuit, and 3 cats who'd been with us since they were kittens. It gets you boxes and boxes of things that aren't worth money, but are worth everything. My grandmother's china, my late father's tools, photo albums, the quilt my aunt made before she passed. 18 years gets you a life so intertwined you forget where you end and the shared history begins. And then, 18 years gets you a job offer.
Mine.
A company across the country, 2,200 miles away, offered me a transfer with a raise and a promotion big enough that we couldn't say no. We talked about it for weeks. Derek was enthusiastic. He told me this was exactly the fresh start we needed. He even found his own job lead out there before we'd fully committed in the same city. It felt, for a brief shining moment, like we were a team running towards something together instead of 2 people just surviving side by side. So we made the plan. I'd go first because my start date was firmer and someone needed to be there to sign the new lease and get the new house ready. Derek would stay behind for a few weeks, pack up our entire 18-year life into the moving pod I'd already ordered and paid for, tie up loose ends with his own new job offer, and then fly out to meet me. I want you to sit in that moment with me for a second. I packed up my office. I said goodbye to coworkers I'd known for a decade. I hugged friends in driveways with tears running down both our faces. I drove 2,200 miles by myself, my car packed with what I could fit. My dog Biscuit riding shotgun with his head out the window the whole way like he didn't have a single worry in the world. I unpacked silverware into a kitchen I'd never cooked in. I hung curtains in a bedroom I'd never slept in with my husband. I started a brand new job in a city where I knew no one, coming home every night to an echoing, half-empty house, eating dinner standing at the counter because the dining table hadn't arrived yet. I did all of this alone, trusting that the other half of my team was back home finishing his part of the job. 2 weeks. That's how long I lasted before the call came. Part 2. The phone call that changed everything. I remember exactly where I was standing. In the kitchen, of all places, leaning against the counter, phone pressed to my ear, half listening because I assumed Derek was calling with a shipping update on the pod. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice had this strange, performative calm to it, like he'd rehearsed this in the mirror. "Okay," I said. My stomach was already sinking, the way your body sometimes knows before your brain does. I've fallen in love with someone else. I want to describe the physical sensation of hearing those words because I was shocked, doesn't even scratch the surface. It felt like the floor tilted 30 degrees beneath me without actually moving. My ears started ringing. My hand, the one not holding the phone, gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. I remember my mouth was suddenly bone dry, like all the moisture in my body had evacuated at once. I remember the absurd, intrusive thought that floated up through the noise. I left the stove on. Did I leave the stove on? My brain grasping for anything mundane to hold on to instead of the thing that was actually happening. He didn't tell me she was pregnant. He saved that detail for later, like a slow-release poison instead of a single dose. I asked him questions. I don't remember most of them. I remember asking how long. I remember him saying it just happened while I was busy packing our entire life into boxes for him. I remember the cruelty of the timing settling into my chest like a physical weight, that while I was wrapping his grandfather's old watch in bubble wrap, labeling boxes with care, trusting him with the literal physical remnants of our marriage, he was falling in love with someone else in real time, 2,000 miles away from the consequences. I hung up the phone at some point.
I don't remember saying goodbye.
I sat down on the kitchen floor of a house I barely knew, in a city where I had no friends, no family, and a dog who came and put his head in my lap because dogs always know. That was the call. That was the floor falling out. But it wasn't even close to the worst part. Here's where the story stops being about heartbreak and starts being about something closer to theft. I assumed, naively in retrospect, that even a man who just confessed an affair would still pack up and ship our belongings like he'd agreed to. I assumed wrong. While I was 2,200 miles away, frantically trying to process the end of my marriage while still showing up to a brand new job every morning, Derek was busy. Not packing. Selling. He listed our furniture on Facebook Marketplace. He listed it on Craigslist. He listed it on eBay. The couch we'd bought together on our 5th anniversary. The dining table I'd been eating dinner without for 2 weeks because it hadn't shipped yet, except it was never going to ship because he'd already sold it to a stranger for cash. My grandmother's china, pieces that weren't replaceable, pieces that had survived 2 house moves and a flood, sold off to strangers for whatever they'd offer, because every dollar he made was a dollar closer to funding his new life with his pregnant girlfriend. I found out almost by accident. A friend back home saw one of my own end tables listed on Facebook Marketplace with a stranger's phone number attached and sent me a screenshot asking, "Isn't this your house?" I called everyone I could think of. I begged friends back home to physically go to the house and see what was happening. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Derek wasn't just selling furniture. He was selling everything. The contents of an entire 18-year marriage, liquidated for cash, item by item, while I sat helpless on the other side of the country. And then it got worse. He tried to sell Biscuit, my dog. The same dog who'd ridden shotgun with his head out the window the whole way across the country, who curled up against me on the kitchen floor the night my marriage ended. Derek listed him online along with our 3 cats like they were furniture too, like living beings who'd slept in our bed for years, were just more inventory to liquidate. I want you to really sit with that for a second. Not the furniture. Not the china. The animals. The creatures who depended on us, who didn't understand betrayal or affairs or moving trucks, who just loved the people who fed them. He tried to sell them. My friends got there in time. I will be forever, permanently grateful to the people who drove to that house and physically intervened, who told him no, who took my pets into their own homes until I could arrange to get them. Out of an entire 18-year household, I managed to salvage 10 boxes. 10 boxes of family heirlooms my friends managed to grab before he sold those too, and my pets. That's it. 10 boxes and 4 animals out of 18 years. Everything else, the furniture, the keepsakes, the wedding gifts, the things that made a house feel like our house, gone. Sold for cash to fund his new beginning with a woman he'd known for what turned out to be a fraction of the time he'd known me. You'd think that would be the cruelest thing he did. It wasn't. After all of that, after selling my belongings, after trying to sell my pets, after blindsiding me with an affair confession over the phone while I was alone in a new city, Derek filed for divorce. And he didn't file quietly, or fairly, or with any trace of the guilt you'd expect from a man who'd just done what he did. He sued me. He came after alimony. He came after the house. The same house I'd never even gotten to live in with him as a married couple, the one I'd flown across the country to make a home, the one he was now living in with his secret affair while it was still legally half mine. He came after my retirement account, the one I'd built over 18 years of being the primary breadwinner while he job-hopped and found himself. I had nothing left to fight back with. The man who sold my furniture for cash had left me with no money for a lawyer. So I did what people do when they have no other choice. I represented myself. Pro se, they call it. No attorney, just me, a stack of forms, late nights researching family law on my laptop, and a quiet, simmering determination that he was not going to take one more thing from me without a fight. Let me tell you what it feels like to sit across a courtroom, or even just across a negotiation table, from the person who broke you alone, without a lawyer, against someone trying to extract money and property from the wreckage he created. It's terrifying. Your hands shake even when you're trying to look calm. You rehearse your words in the car beforehand, because you know you'll only get one shot to say them right. You feel the old instinct to just give in, to let him have what he wants, just to make the pain stop faster. I didn't give in. And then, something happened that changed the entire trajectory of the case. I got tipped off about the baby. Derek hadn't told me his girlfriend was pregnant. He'd let me find that out secondhand, the same way I found out about the furniture sales, through other people, through whispers, through the cracks he didn't bother to seal. But once that information surfaced, once it became part of the legal record, his entire alimony and retirement claim collapsed. You can't credibly demand spousal support and a cut of your ex-wife's retirement while you're starting a brand new family with the woman you cheated with. The judge wasn't sympathetic to that particular brand of audacity. The alimony claim died. The retirement claim died. He did still walk away with the house, a bitter pill, knowing the home I'd flown across the country to set up was now his and his pregnant girlfriend's. But I walked away with something he couldn't put a price tag on and sell on Facebook Marketplace. My freedom. It came at a steep cost, though. I want to be honest about that because this isn't a fairy tale where the universe immediately rights every wrong. I was nearly homeless by the time the divorce was final. I had no real savings. Most of it had evaporated into legal forms, moving costs, and a financial hole Derek had helped dig. For months after I arrived in my new city for that big job transfer, the position I'd uprooted my entire life got eliminated. The company laid me off, and not long after, it closed entirely. So let's recap where I was at that point. Betrayed by my husband of 18 years, robbed of nearly everything I owned, dragged through a one-sided divorce I had to fight without a lawyer, and now unemployed in a city I'd moved to for a job that no longer existed. I was, in every sense of the word, a mess. I cried in parking lots. I cried in the shower so my roommate at the time wouldn't hear. I lay awake some nights wondering what exactly I'd done to deserve losing everything. My marriage, my home, my belongings, my career, almost simultaneously. If you've ever been at the absolute bottom, you know that feeling. The bottom isn't dramatic. It isn't a single moment of collapse. It's quiet. It's just you alone, doing math in your head about how many more weeks your bank account can survive. Here's where most revenge stories pivot to some grand scheme, a plan, a sting, a moment of orchestrated payback. Mine doesn't have that, and honestly, that's the whole point of what makes this story satisfying. I didn't plot against Derek. I didn't spend my nights scheming how to ruin him. I was too busy trying to survive. But somewhere in that survival, something shifted in me. I remember the exact night it happened. I was sitting on a secondhand mattress on the floor of a sparsely furnished rental, because remember, I had 10 boxes and 4 pets and not much else, and I had my laptop open, staring at student loan application forms. I'd been a strong student decades ago, before life and marriage and corporate jobs had filled up every spare hour. I'd always had a quiet, half-buried dream of finishing my education, of proving to myself that I was capable of more than just being someone's breadwinner while he chased finding himself. I sat there that night and made a decision that had nothing to do with Derek at all. I decided I was going back to school. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything to him. For me. Because for the first time in 18 years, nobody was going to need me to subsidize their unemployment, sell my china for cash, or threaten my retirement in a courtroom. I had nothing left to lose, which, strangely, made me feel lighter than I had in years. There's a particular kind of freedom in hitting bottom. Once you're already there, every direction is up. I took out loans. I enrolled. I went back to school in my mid-40s, sitting in classrooms beside people half my age, doing homework on weekends instead of going out, working part-time gig jobs to scrape by while I studied. It was exhausting. It was humbling. There were nights I questioned whether I'd made the right call, whether I was too old, too broke, too behind to catch up to anyone. But I kept going. 2.5 years of classes, papers, exams, and sleepless nights. 2.5 years of rebuilding myself from the 10 boxes and 4 pets I had left. And at the end of it, I graduated. Summa cum laude, top of my class, the kind of honor you don't get by accident or by coasting. Graduating wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of the part that actually feels like justice. Companies started calling. Multiple offers, multiple interviews, the kind of attention that, frankly, felt surreal after years of feeling invisible and underestimated. I want you to imagine that whiplash for a second, going from sitting on a secondhand mattress wondering how you'd survive the month, to fielding job offers from companies competing for your attention. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, including me. I didn't take the highest-paying offer. I didn't chase the most prestigious title. Somewhere in those 2.5 years of rebuilding myself from nothing, I'd met someone. A new partner. Someone who saw the woman I was becoming rather than the wreckage Derek had left behind. And when it came time to decide what came next, I followed my heart instead of my resume. I packed up, far more gently this time, with far less to pack, but with infinitely more peace, and moved across the country again. This time to a house by the beach, with a man who actually showed up for me. I joke now that at 46, I became what I lovingly call a trophy girlfriend. It's a joke, but it's also a quiet, satisfied kind of joke, the kind you can only make once you've actually built something real to laugh from. Life didn't just get better. It got, in my own words, plush. After 18 years of being the breadwinner, 18 years of carrying financial weight while someone else found himself on my dime, I reached a point where I genuinely didn't need to work for survival anymore. So now I work because I want to, not because I have to. I volunteer. I take on gig work here and there just to stay sharp and engaged. I started painting, something I'd never had the bandwidth or peace of mind to explore during my marriage. I started growing artisanal weed as a hobby, which, frankly, is a delightfully petty pleasure to have access to after years of being financially controlled. I'm currently looking into finishing a PhD, another bucket list item, crossed off not out of desperation, but out of genuine curiosity and joy. Let that sink in. The woman who is nearly homeless, who fought her own divorce without a lawyer, who salvaged 10 boxes and 4 pets from an 18-year life. That same woman is now sitting in a beach house, painting on weekends, considering a doctorate purely because she wants to, not because anyone's forcing her hand. Now, let's talk about Derek. Because this is the part of the story where karma, that slow, patient force that never seems to be in a hurry, finally showed up to collect. Remember the pregnant girlfriend, the love of his life, as he so dramatically announced on Facebook? Derek married her almost immediately after our divorce was finalized. Less than 2 months after the ink dried on our divorce papers, he was already a father again, starting his shiny new family with the woman he'd built his second act around. I remember reading his public proclamation online. The love of his life, finally found, finally happy. And I remember sitting there with a strange, almost clinical curiosity, thinking, if she's the love of your life, what exactly was I for 18 years? It's a question I never got a real answer to, and honestly, I stopped needing one. Some questions you let go of not because you've forgiven the answer, but because you've simply outgrown needing it. But here's where the story gets its real payoff, and it's not because of anything I did. It's because Derek built his entire second life on the same shaky, impulsive foundation he'd built everything else on, and shaky foundations don't hold, no matter how badly you want them to. Less than a year into the marriage, his new wife left him. She took their son and walked away, just like that, the love of his life, gone in less time than it takes some couples to plan a wedding. Just like that, Derek went from a man who'd blown up an 18-year marriage for a soulmate to a 50-year-old single father, raising a baby largely alone, in a relationship that had burned out faster than the gas money he'd spent selling our furniture. And it didn't stop there. Derek, the man who once had a stable, breadwinning wife covering the financial gaps while he searched for his real calling, now has no real career to speak of.
No stability.
No safety net. He's living, by every account I've heard, paycheck to paycheck, alone, raising a young son, with no partner, no backup plan, and certainly no 18 years loyal spouse quietly absorbing the financial shortfall this time. Meanwhile, the woman who left him, the one he blew up his whole life for, has already remarried. She moved on swiftly and easily, the same way Derek once thought he could simply move on from me without consequence. Except this time, he was the one left holding the wreckage. He was the one sitting in an empty house, minus a partner, minus the furniture he never had to sell because, ironically, he never had much worth selling this time around. He was the one left to explain to a small child someday why mommy left, the same way he once left explanations dangling for me over a static-filled phone call from 2,000 miles away. I didn't orchestrate any of this. I didn't slash his tires or call his new wife with secrets or sabotage his career out of spite. I didn't have to. I simply did the one thing he never thought I had it in me to do. I survived, and then I thrived, while he built his entire empire on sand. There's a particular, almost meditative satisfaction in watching karma do the heavy lifting you never had the energy, or honestly the desire, to do yourself. I think back sometimes to the kitchen floor I sat on the night he called to confess, dog's head in my lap, world spinning. I think about 10 boxes. I think about a secondhand mattress and student loan paperwork. I think about how thoroughly, completely certain Derek must have been that I'd crumble, that a woman in her 40s, blindsided, broke, and abandoned, simply wouldn't have the resources or resilience to rebuild. He underestimated me the same way he underestimated the foundation of his own choices. And the universe, in its patient, unhurried way, simply let both of those miscalculations play out to their natural conclusions. The real payoff of this story isn't a single dramatic confrontation. It's a split screen. On one side, a woman who once sat on a kitchen floor with nothing but a dog and the wreckage of an 18-year marriage, now painting in a sunlit room of a beach house, considering a PhD purely for the joy of learning, financially secure enough to volunteer instead of grind, tending an artisanal little garden, surrounded by the 4 pets she fought to save. On the other side, a 50-year-old man, alone in a too-quiet house, raising a son by himself, no career to speak of, watching the woman he left his life for already remarried and moved on without him, exactly the way he once thought he could move on without consequence from me. He sold my couch for cash. He sold my china for cash. He tried to sell my dog. He sold 18 years of shared history to fund a love story that didn't even last as long as our actual marriage's worst year. And in the end, all that selling bought him nothing but an empty house and a hard lesson in exactly how little his love of his life had actually cost him to lose. I didn't have to lift a finger for any of it. I just had to keep choosing myself, every single day, until the life I built without him became so undeniably good that his absence stopped being a wound and started being a footnote. I think about that Dr. Seuss quote sometimes, the one about having brains in your head and feet in your shoes, about being the one who decides where to go. It sounds almost too simple for a story this messy. But it's true. Nobody was coming to rescue me. No court ruling, no apology, no act of karma was going to hand me my life back. I had to build it myself, one painful, uncertain step at a time. And somewhere in that rebuilding, the best revenge just happened on its own. Not because I planned it, but because the only thing I controlled the whole time was the direction I chose to walk in. If this story gave you chills, or if it reminded you of your own bottom-of-the-floor moment that you climbed your way out of, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment and tell us, what's the most satisfying revenge, planned or completely accidental, that you've ever witnessed? And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe, because we've got plenty more tales of betrayal, resilience, and karma doing its quiet, patient work. See you in the next one.